Angels, it's Hailey Reese and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so excited that you guys are here and I truly hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you, when this video finally reaches you. You guys, I am so excited to dive into today's video with you all. Actually, recently I've gotten a couple of requests to dive into the unusual life of Charles Manson. And honestly, it has been a while since I've really looked into this particular case or this particular life. And the more that I dug into it recently, the more that I was reminded of just how unusual and bizarre his life was up until the Manson family murders. So today we're gonna dive into the life of Charles Manson from the early days on to his passing, the Manson family cult, and the Manson family murders, which were just absolutely gruesome and horrific and ultimately unthinkable. So today's video is probably gonna be a lengthy one. I hope that you guys are excited and I hope that you guys enjoy today's video nonetheless. The last thing I wanna say before we officially dive into this is always let me know in the comment section down below if there are any cases or anything that you would like to see me dive into here on my channel. And with that being said, let's get into the unusual life of Charles Manson.
Guilty. I wouldn't do anything that I felt guilty about.
You don't feel guilty at all?
There's no need to feel guilty. I haven't done anything I'm ashamed of. Maybe I haven't done enough. I might be ashamed of that for not doing enough. I live where there's no TV, there's no radio, there's no clocks, there's no electric lights. The girls carry water. They don't wear makeup. They have their babies by themselves. They go in the shack and squat down and have their babies. I live in the
So before we get into the life that Charles would create for himself, ultimately the family/cult that he would create for himself, I think it's really important to first and foremost dive into his childhood. Because I found in a lot of cases that I've been looking into where somebody goes on to lead an unusual, unconventional, even dangerous or murderous life, there's often something within their childhood that either happened, like a tragedy or some sort of trauma or a lack of love. And while that's not true for every single case, there are normal individuals who do go on to kill. It may have played a role in the life of Charles Manson. So let's take a look at his early days. Manson was born Charles Maddox on November 12, 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio, to Kathleen Maddox, a 16-year-old girl who was both an alcoholic and a prostitute. Kathleen later married William Manson, but that marriage would fall apart rather quickly. Now, in the early days of Charles Manson's life, he was honestly passed around a lot. He never really had any real stability, especially from his mother. As I mentioned, she was dealing with her own issues on top of the fact that she had him at just 16 years old, and he really lacked a family environment and stability. Now, by the time he was 12 years old, he was placed into a boys' school, but that wouldn't last very long. He decided that he was going to run away from the boys' school and find his way back to his mother, which is absolutely heartbreaking, especially because his mother would deny him coming back to live with her. Rejected by his attempts to return to his mother, eventually Charles would find himself really just scraping by and committing petty crimes to get by. He really didn't have anybody to rely on or lean on, and he kind of just took to the streets, committing all these different crimes in order to get by in life. Over the next 20 years, Charles would spend his time in and out of reform schools and then also in and out of prison for various crimes. And I guess it was just really safe to say that he was very lost in life. He really lacked that love from his mother, and actually, sadly enough, when he was in prison, he very rarely wanted to leave prison because it was the one place where he had structure and routine and people around him that were caring for him. And so even when he was able to be released from prison, Charles missed being in prison because of his lack of a family life outside of prison, which is so heartbreaking to even imagine. While he was in prison, he took a liking to music. Now, prior to prison, he also really enjoyed music. I read somewhere that he enjoyed church music in particular. That was one of his first introductions to his love for music. But prison was where he really started to take his music a lot more serious. Now, on March 21st, 1967, Charles was released from prison, even though he was reluctant to leave. As I mentioned, that was his only structure, so he didn't want to leave prison, but eventually he was released. Now, once he left prison, he was really longing for that family environment, that family dynamic that he never had. I mean, from what I've read, he really had some serious mommy issues, so to speak. His mom's lack of love for him and lack of caring for him really made him long for deeper connections in the outside world, which I guess in turn leads us into the Manson family cult.
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. You do exactly what I say.
Whatever is necessary to do, do it.
In 1968, Charles Manson found himself in California, where he would ultimately create what is known to many as the Manson family cult, although to them, they were just the Manson family. Since coming out of prison, all he wanted was a family, and since he didn't have a family of his own, he took it into his own hands and decided to create a family of his very own. By all accounts, his unusual charm and persuasive way about him helped him attract young loners, runaways, and the like into his orbit. Many of his followers were young, white, middle-class women, and many of them either felt bored or isolated from their own real families. The family was a group of around 100 followers who, like Charles Manson, had a desire for an unconventional lifestyle and also enjoyed partaking in hallucinogenic drugs. Charles bought a Los Angeles County ranch called Spawn Ranch where they would all live together. And actually, the ranch used to be a rundown movie set, and he thought that it was perfect for them. Now, everybody in the Manson family really idolized Charles Manson, and he had a bunch of very strange to even dark rules that everybody in the family was set to follow, and they all followed them pretty much to a T. Now, you guys can look up all of the different Manson family rules if you want to. It's actually quite interesting to look through all the different rules. They range from minor rules to really deep and actually kind of dark rules, but some of them were like, for instance, they had to partake in taking LSD daily, and they all shared breastfeeding duties. You would basically just breastfeed anybody's child on the ranch. They also weren't allowed to have doctors, so they would go through their pregnancies and childbirth completely alone, just with one another, which I guess would be very interesting considering pretty much everybody was on LSD daily. And I also read that when it came time to giving birth to the children, Charles Manson would be the one to cut the umbilical cord, and that he often did so with his teeth. They also weren't allowed books or basically anything that would give them the ability to tell time whatsoever. Oh, and you also weren't allowed to gain weight, more specifically if you were a woman. I read somewhere else online that he would have the women eat after the men, and often there wasn't much left. And then on top of that, the women were very uncomfortable in their skin and often wouldn't indulge in a lot of food. And you also were not allowed to wear glasses. So if you require glasses and you wanted to be part of the Manson family, you would have to disregard your glasses. They would hold on to every single word that he said. He ordered them to do household chores, they would. He would order them to be intimate with one another, and they would. And he often had the women go like scavenging in trash for food. Like basically he would have them dumpster dive in order to get food. And they did it. They all followed all of his rules to a T. They listened to him. They basically worshipped him. And what I think initially began as a search for a true family kind of led to a power trip, in my personal opinion, where he just loved ruling these people and telling them what they could and could not do. And they did it. Now, Charles had some very strange beliefs. It's actually unknown from what I've gathered whether or not he truly believed these things or if he made them up, and since nobody had any ties to the outside world, they were to just believe him. But he would often hold sermons to share these beliefs with his family. He would often talk about a race war that he was certain was coming between the whites and the blacks, and that blood would be shed. And he told his followers that they were all going to go into hiding underground while said race war happens. And then once they emerged from underground, they would be saviors for the black race whom would win the war. And he named this deranged prophecy after the Beatles song Helter Skelter. Now, pretty much everybody in the Manson family, if not all of them, absolutely loved the Beatles. But what was even stranger was they believed that the Beatles also loved them and were fans of the Manson family. So let's kind of backtrack for a second here, because as I mentioned earlier, Charles Manson found a real love for music, and this didn't just go away. Despite him having found his family, he really wanted to make it in the music industry, and he was pursuing music heavily. He would meet Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, and members of the Manson family actually moved in to Dennis's home on Sunset Boulevard for several months. This costed Dennis about $100,000 worth of food, medical bills, and repairs resulting from property damage. But despite all of this, Dennis still really liked Charles Manson and was trying to get industry executives and record producers on board with his music. They were really working together on this album, and he believed in Charles Manson. Eventually, though, this would not go through. There would be a huge argument between Dennis and Charles, which ultimately led to Charles spewing disturbing threats and Dennis wanting absolutely nothing to do with Charles Manson ever again. Now, according to the prosecuting attorney on the Manson case, his love for music and his lack of success in the industry is ultimately what led to what would be known as the Manson family murders. This really sparked something in him, and it made him angry at successful people. He became obsessed with like the rich industry insiders who had blown him off or paid no interest in him, and started calling them pigs with like this deep-rooted hatred within him. He basically decided that they all needed to suffer and die. And I do just want to note that Charles Manson is a diagnosed schizophrenic, for any of you who might be wondering. And no, not everybody with schizophrenia goes to the extremes that he did. I just think that it is important to note his diagnosis. So Charles became an angry person who was angry at the elites and anybody who'd ever left him in the dust, and decided that they needed to die, which ultimately led to what would be known as the Manson family murder.
In a scene described by one investigator as reminiscent of a weird religious rite, 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate, who starred in Valley of the Dolls, was 8 months pregnant and was found in a bikini-type nightgown.
So initially, things got a lot darker with the Manson family. Now, before we dive into what exactly they did and the murders that they would commit that we are aware of, because I'll tell you guys later on in this video, there is a whole lot more that we don't even know about the Manson family. But they would do strange things even prior to deciding that they were going to kill people. They would participate in what they called creepy crawling, which is where they would break into people's houses and essentially rearrange all of their furniture, maybe steal a couple of things, and just ultimately give people the sense of lack of safety. Like, they didn't want to harm the people whose houses they were breaking into, but they wanted them to feel uncomfortable and afraid within their own homes, which, yes, that would do that to anybody. If I ever woke up and all my furniture was rearranged and things were stolen, even the idea of somebody having been in my house is enough to just give you the heebie-jeebies. So they were already doing very strange things. Like, if I sat here today and told you guys everything that this family did, you would be like, what in the actual heck? But we don't have time for that today, so we're kind of brushing over things. But it is important to note that they were partaking in creepy crawling. But in August of 1969, things would go from their harmless creepy crawling to something much more disturbing. Charles Manson basically summoned his followers and announced that it was time for Helter Skelter to begin. Actually sent some of his most trusted devotees to commit homicides against Hollywood's wealthy elites and to try to frame black men for the crimes, thus initiating the race war that Manson believed was coming. Prior to this, he made a list of all the people that he believed deserved to die, which it always blows my mind in these types of cases that any human being believes that they're reserved the right to decide when it's the end of somebody's life. But I mean, I guess it's a blessing that my mind has never ever went there. But yeah, he made a list and was like, these are the ones that need to be taken down. The sad thing is that Roman Polanski was not the cult leader's intended target. Charles chose the Polanski house because he had once unsuccessfully tried to get a recording deal from a producer who used to live there. Meaning, he targeted a house because an individual had burned him in the past who didn't even live there anymore. And when you know this going into what I'm about to share with you, it is so deeply disturbing that he ever thought this was okay. But what's also important to note, you guys, is Charles wanted all these people dead. He wanted to take them all down, but he didn't want to get his hands dirty. Although he made a point to make sure that every single person he sent in played a role in what they were about to do. So he would just like park up outside and let them go do his dirty work. On August 8th, he told his family members that they were to kill anybody who was within that home and that they were to make it brutal. And brutal they did. It is so disturbing. We are not going to go into detail of that particular crime. That would be a video in and of itself, and it is so sad. But 5 lives were lost, including Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, you guys. They then wrote in blood pigs on the front door of the home, which was a reference that was supposed to lead people to believe that the Black Panthers were at fault for this crime. They wanted the police to believe that that was who had done this and not the Manson family. And they did exactly what Charles Manson told them to do. As I mentioned, he ordered them to ensure that every single person played a role in it, which I believe is because if you actually play a role in it, you're not going to go rat out what happened because you are equally at fault. So he made them all do this, and they did. And after they seemingly got away with it, the next night, he gave them another task. They were sent to kill Los Angeles business owners Leno and Rosemary LaBianca inside of their home. Afterward, in a similar move like they just did the night before, they then wrote "Death to Pigs" in blood and also added another message that said "Helter Skelter." Rosemary's son from another marriage returned and found it very strange that the blinds were drawn. He called his sister and her boyfriend came over. When they went inside the home, they were met with the absolutely horrific scene, which I can't even fathom how that would feel to walk in on that. It's so disturbing. Now, what's really interesting is that the Manson family would wind up arrested, but nothing to do with the murder cases. They actually weren't even suspecting of the Manson family for that, but they were arrested on separate charges. In 1969, the county sheriff brought them in without any suspicion that they were a part of either one of the murders. Now, while in custody though, one of his followers started bragging to other criminals about the crimes that they had committed, which actually happens a lot more often than you guys would imagine. There's something about criminals that they like brag to other criminals about the crimes that they've committed. Not always, but it does happen. She also revealed that there was a whole other list of others that they were going to go for. And somebody decided to spill the beans, so to speak, and rat them out completely. But let's talk about this list for a second. The list included Elizabeth Taylor and husband Richard Burton, Frank Sinatra, Steve McQueen, and Tom Jones were just a few of the many that they had put on their list of targets. Which, could you imagine afterwards hearing that you were on a list and knowing that they would actually go through with it? I think you'd be so thankful. Well, I mean, obviously, you'd be so thankful that that never happened. When asked why they wanted to kill celebrities, a member of the Manson family said that they liked targeting high-profile people because they knew that it would be talked about and it would shock the world and make people take notice. But as I mentioned, people truly believe that it's because Charles Manson had a desire to be that successful, that well-known, and that was ripped away from him. So the Manson family was taken down, and so began the trial.
Charles Manson, 36, chose a house at random, tied up the family at gunpoint, then ordered his followers to go inside and commit ritual slaughter.
Feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad.
It's clear that you were guilty of murder, and yet he says in all his conversations with you, he never heard you express remorse. Have you never felt it?
Remorse for what? You people have done everything in the world to me. Doesn't that give me equal rights?
Charles Manson's trial became a national spectacle in which he exhibited bizarre and violent behavior. During the trial, Charles Manson actually released an album titled The Lie in order to raise money for his defense. But there was a real debate as to whether or not Charles Manson should be charged with the murders, because ultimately, yes, he ordered them to do it, but he did not physically partake in the murders. On one side, people felt as though he should not be tried for murder as he didn't participate in it at all, but on the other side, people were like, hello, he was the mastermind behind this whole entire thing. He needs to take accountability and be held responsible for the lives lost because of his deranged mind. During the trials, they all carved an X into their foreheads to signify their lack of association with society, their like withdrawn nature from society. And throughout the entire trial, people noticed that the Manson family acted very, very weird. They were giggling, they were giving glances to Charles. It really seemed as though they had absolutely no remorse for their crimes, which I've noticed whenever I watch trials and I see people behaving in this way. It just makes me feel sick to my stomach. Like, how can you do what you did? You killed not only multiple people, but a pregnant woman, an 8-month pregnant woman, and you're giggling in court. Like, what? Even though Charles stayed out of the Polanski house on the night of the crime and didn't take part in the LaBianca killings either, he would later be charged with murder on the grounds that he had influenced his followers and masterminded the crimes. The jury took a week to deliberate and came to a verdict of guilty for all charges of murder and conspiracy for all defendants. During the penalty phase of the trial, the jury declared the penalty of death. Pursuant to California Supreme Court ruling in 1972, the death penalty for all of the defendants were commuted to life in prison. On January 25th, 1971, Charles Manson was convicted of first-degree murder for directing the deaths of the Tate and LaBianca victims. He was sentenced to life in prison and spent the next 4 decades behind bars until his death in 2017. It's said that Charles Manson passed away from natural causes. In March of 2018, the court awarded the body of Charles Manson to his grandson. His name was Jason Freeman, and he was the only son of Charles Manson Jr. He said that he planned to cremate his grandfather's body and then scatter it in an undisclosed location. But let's get into the actual crimes. Was that it? Did they only kill twice? Well, no. We also know of the fact that they did kill one of their own family members because they thought that he was a snitch. But there is so much more that people believe they partook in. The Manson family was said to have committed something around 35 murders, but unfortunately most of those cases were never tried due to lack of evidence. And there's plenty of people who believe that it was even more than 35, that they felt as though they were absolutely invincible and that they were no strangers to killing. But many people noted that it wouldn't even be worth it to continue to look into what they could have done because they were already sentenced to life. So at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. They were locked up where they could no longer hurt anybody else. So as I mentioned, Charles Manson passed away of natural causes, and that is basically the end of his very, very strange and dark life. It's so strange to look at his life and actually wonder, had he have had that love as a child, would he have still grown up to live an unconventional life and then wind up being the mastermind behind some of the most horrific murders? Or would he have lived a normal life? It kind of goes into that study of nature versus nurture. Are you born a killer or do you become a killer? And that's something that I'm very, very interested in, and I wonder all the time. But nonetheless, it was a very different time. Like, hallucinogenic drugs were all the rage, and to say the least, it's just really unfortunate to see where it went. A part of me believes that initially he went into creating this family with all the right intentions and then got on a power trip, felt invincible, and since he didn't identify with society, I think a big part of him felt that he was above all of the laws and rules, which wound up being untrue. As you guys saw in some of my transitions here, he didn't feel any remorse. In fact, he said that he felt he didn't do enough. That's what he regrets. So I don't think he learned anything from any of it, and it's just crazy to think that had one of his family members not bragged about what she did, they could have went on to do a whole lot more, especially with that little book that they created. But that is basically the life of Charles Manson. I would love to know from you guys what you think of this. Definitely let me know in the comments below. Do you think if he'd have been given a proper childhood, he would have still grown up this way, or do you think that that is something that we can't determine? Let me know down in the comments below, along with any other cases you guys want to see me dive into. And that is it for today's video. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed, but you do enjoy my videos, I would seriously love it more than you will ever know if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button. And please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until next time, well, that was a weird little kiss sound. I love you.